Hello, everyone. Hope the mic works now. Thank you for being here. I realize I do have something of a captive audience, one talk before the closing ceremony, so thank you for being here, I suppose. We can turn our brains off a little bit for this one. I will not be talking of anything much technical. You will not be hearing the phrase ZK. You will not be hearing anything L2 related. With the confidence that comes from a man who has been at law school for exactly 1 year, I will be talking to you about a topic that has been popping up in some precedents recently, which is the notion of contracts getting exploited and then counter-exploited. I'd like to thank Shizzy for the picture. She did ask if I wanted any more. I think this is probably one's enough. So, yeah, in short, I'll be talking about contract upgradability and kind of like the vector that it presents in terms of like, it's both a weapon for ruggability, and it's a counteroffensive weapon in terms of recovering things. How should we react to these things when they happen? How should we react? There are two examples that happened in the last couple of months that are really important. Important, one more than the other. One was Platypus, which is on Avalanche, and the other one was the big one, the Wormhole recovery. I'll be talking a little bit about how this stuff is kind of being handled in the real world outside of these little bubbles. And like I said, not much technical. I'll have one thing about how diamond proxy patterns work, but we're not doing code. We're very tired. If you're like me, I've been going to bed at 3 a.m. every night for the last 4 nights. I'm exhausted. So the difference between the EOA wallets that we all use to get our apes drained and a smart contract where we put our money to get rugged is that a smart contract does have bytecode. That's the logic where things are contained. An EOA is controlled private key by you. Smart contract doesn't have one. As we know, as developers will know, this is like the technical bit I'll do. You've got some techniques for like metamorphic contracts. You can use diamond proxy patterns and so on and so forth. There are some implications about what you do with states for that, but it's tricky to easily upgrade the logic of a contract. However, sometimes that's exactly what you need to do. And so normally, when we see this, it's we've spotted a bug and nothing's been acted on, and so we just make a change. Or we're doing an upgrade, like a V2 of something, and we react to that. I want to talk a little bit more about normally when an exploit happens, contracts normally stay dead. Like if they can't be recovered, that's it, end of. If they can be recovered, if funds can be recovered somehow, how, and what happens if a court gets involved? And yeah, the impetus behind these is different, right? Sometimes we'll be the ones that want to act, and sometimes we're forced to. And this is starting to happen a little bit more, and it's going to accelerate as the years go on. So Platypus Finance, you guys might have recognized this name from about a week ago, because it was attacked a second time. I finished writing these slides, and I'm pretty sure my Google Slides template is a death note, because as soon as I finished, it happened again. Different vector, but again. So they're an AMM on Avalanche. They are stables-oriented. They do single-sided liquidity. They had something that was a pretty cool idea, which was that if you had like a MasterChef contract and you deposited LPs of stables, then you could like use that as collateral for an over-collateralized stablecoin called USP. Bugging it, that meant that you could deposit things in, pull out like up to however much it was LTV, and then use that as kind of your intermediary currency. Except there's a bug in it, and you could not, you could easily like pull out your LP and not repay the debt. So you just got a bunch of bad debt sitting in your MasterChef contract. 9.1 million stolen in total over, I think, 2 attacks. But that didn't all go to the attacker because, here's, for those of you who are devs, there's a little bit of a rundown. It was flash loan oriented, like all of these things are nowadays. Flash loan some stables, deposit them, max out a loan, withdraw your LP, swap your now bad debt into like actual stables, and off you go. This was done really badly. If you know who did this, you should probably boo them. So executed an attack, couldn't get the funds out, they're stuck. Tried it again, accidentally sent 380K to Aave, because that was their provider for their flash loan. The flash loan didn't have any access control, so anyone could ping it, and it automatically approved USDC to the proxy. That proxy is controlled by the Platypus team. So anyone here who knows how proxies work kind of tells you what, like, the way this goes. Only technical slide. Only one, I promise. If you're interacting with a proxy, there's a slot in there that points at an address. It's called implementation. And that is an address that says where the logic is. So what you'll do is you'll ding the proxy, and it'll point at the implementation and go, this is how I need to react. That's upgradable. Normally, that's controlled by a multisig. I don't know why I included the bit about maintaining state through delegate call. It's not necessarily relevant to our purposes, but I just wanted to show that I do know how delegate call works. Counter-exploit's simple. If you're automatically hard coding approval to a proxy, just change the proxy. And if the function that calls the flash loan doesn't have, automatically forces it, cool, I'll have that back. Thank you very much. There was about a 20% recovery, which is not bad. Oh, button's not working, so yeah. This was partial, and it was really slick. I think BlockSec helped out with it. Really cool, but the consequences, right? I think everyone who works as a developer knows that if you maintain a proxy, you've always had the ability to do these kind of changes, and you just take it on faith that they won't. Mainly because maybe they won't know how to, or because of reputational risks, or they just don't want their hands forced. But obviously, if things have been stolen, you're going to react. What I'm more interested in, as a mini law student, is now what happens when a court of law demands that you actually act on doing something like this. If you're told with an injunction, you need to upgrade your proxy, you need to change your logic in X and Y way. I'm going to take this opportunity to, I have a bunch of merch left here from my overlords. As you guys might know, I work at Euler nowadays. I also have some stuff from Wintermute funded, the Wildcat protocol, the shirt that I'm wearing. And I'm not carrying this back to the UK, so please accept free tokens, free hats, and shirts. If you would. Oh, trust me, you're doing me a favor, because the tax I'll have to pay to get this back, I'm very grateful about it. I'll give that 30 seconds. If any of you have an Euler card already and double redeem, I will find you. So, there's plenty. I literally just brought my suitcase and packed it full of stuff I don't want to bring home. So thank you again, everyone. I wanted the mega hats to be red, but I don't get what I want. So, moving on. The more interesting example of this that happened recently was Wormhole, or rather, Wormhole's recovery. We all remember that last year, in February, was one of the big ones. There were 3 massive hacks that were all over all over $250 million. Wormhole was the second one of them, I think, between Poly and Ronin. 120,000 ETH worth of collateral, so 320 million at the time. Jump stepped in within a day, and they plugged it, and everyone was pretty baffled about that. I mean, it's in their purposes, their investment in Wormhole. Chain checkers will have noticed that they moved these funds around for about a year. I can't actually remember where they went right now, but they ended up settling in Oasis, which was, I think a lot of people thought at the time was the same thing as Maker, but it's leverage-empowered vaults. And so they sat in there for a little while. The automation's important here for obvious reasons, or perhaps not. If you want automation on these things, you're going to want to introduce, say, a stop-loss trigger. And to do that, it allows you to buy collateral, take on debt. And to do that, you need to give an approval for the contents of your wallet to a proxy, or a contract. In this case, it was a proxy. So yeah, the same pattern as with Platypus, right? You're you've opened the door up to a proxy address here. And a white hat group, it might have been BlockSec again, don't judge me if I'm wrong, noticed this, reached out to Oasis with a proof of concept, and said, we can get this back. Now, this is the stuff I find really fascinating. I think the Oasis team didn't necessarily just want to jump right into it and say, this is, we're just going to take it, end of. I think they might have been a bit concerned. Oasis Labs is a UK company. They didn't want to just jump in and break the law. So what they did was, for the best of my reading, they reached out to the UK High Court and basically asked them to force an injunction on them to act. Which is a weird implication, because they're like, hey, can we get permission to exploit our own protocol? Exploit's in a bit of a quote here. Because it was taken from Wormhole, it's being recovered from Oasis. But I think in UK law, you might want to use the term replevin remedy, but maybe not. I don't know. Look, I did go to law school. The consequence of how this actually, like, once they got the injunction, a wallet, which I think we believe is now Jump, was added to the Oasis multisig. They executed all of the transactions that gave complete control of vaults over to them. It was like 5 transactions, and all of them were co-signed by Oasis multisig holders. And this, I think, is the interesting thing, because I think that they wanted the cover of the injunction to say we were compelled to do this. So yeah, all of the debt and the collateral from the 2 vaults owned by the Wormhole attacker got moved away. Jump shifted over 80 million in DAI, and they walked away with 4,000 more ETH than was taken. I'm pretty sure that's offset by the 80 million, but fine. Well done, Jump. And well done, Oasis. It was actually really slick. As I said, this was great for them. Like, you know, this made the news for like a good couple of days, but it wouldn't have been possible without Jump or whoever was actually adding it, like actively being added to the multisig, and people at Oasis co-signing. So, like, yeah, it's the seeking of a legal mandate that I'm interested in, and perhaps the contra, although this might be a little bit of mental masturbation, is what if Jump had forced it in court? And what if Oasis had looked at this and said, I don't want to comply? I think we cover the range of ideologies here, right? From utilitarian DeFi people like myself to fairly militant crypto punks who believe that, like, yeah, we should not be bending our knee to a court. If you're a doxed entity, or like, say, like the court of your jurisdiction insists on doing something. Your options there are quite limited. Like, you be anonymous, you make sure that you can't do upgrades, you can't, you relinquish all control. That's pretty limiting, right? Because it does leave you in kind of a pure, like, it is what it is sense. And there are lots of people who say that that's how DeFi should be. It's not my place to tell them they're right or wrong. So yeah, if you're doxed, like, if it's easy to work out, and by the way, the feds are much better chain checkers than you think, that they know who you are and they tell you to comply, you're probably going to comply. You're not going to get an injunction and get told, now I'm burning my access. You're just going to get contempt of court and off you go. This assumes that, like, the law that you are being asked to comply with is reasonable. And in Oasis's case, it was weird. Like, there was a very specific set of circumstances for this. They were like, we're telling you what we want you to ask us to do. But the law's a little bit wavy around how, like, tort works, and possession and assets, and, like, indeed these things aren't even really classified, like, properly yet. In the UK, we've got some stuff now that falls under, like, our Financial Conduct Authority, but the rest of the world not so much, as we've seen with Gary. So you don't need to read this, I promise you don't. But there is a bill that's currently sitting in the Illinois Senate called SB 1887. Seriously, don't read it. But the gist of it is, and, like, this will never become law, but it's probably indicative of the kind of thinking that we're facing right now in the US. If any blockchain processes a transaction in Illinois and something goes wrong, like they have a claim for it, they can go to a court, a judge, a lawyer, get an injunction, and demand that Ethereum hard fork, or Bitcoin hard fork, or anything of the sort. And yeah, there's a $5,000 to $10,000 a day bill for, like, every day it doesn't comply. This is, on the face of it, absolutely insane. Like, so, yeah, like, this was hard enough to do after the DAO. Yeah, man? Like, I remember reading about this. This is going to haunt Slefteris for the rest of his life. This was hard enough to do, like, with pretty widespread consensus from the, like, 96% consensus from the small amount of Ether that voted. Like, and that was just native tokens, right? That was, like, DAO tokens and ETH. If you're telling someone to, like, unwind a CDP, because someone, like, objects to, like, the way that something's gone wrong, determining the state root alone is going to, yeah, like, no survivors. It would take forever. Like, you get no buy-in, no, it's not happening. So, other questions, yeah, they go, okay, cool, you haven't done this for a couple of years. Here's your $1 million fine. Who's liable for that? Is it everyone in Illinois that's a validator? If it's a proof of work chain, is it the miners? If it's Ethereum, is it the Ethereum Foundation? Like, it's not clear, and it's weird that this is being posed as, like, law that should be taken in. Fun fact, I'm also geo-blocked by the senator that presented this, so, like, I haven't got the measure of the man at all. I think I wanted to kind of leave it at this, as, like, law is, like, the laws that we're dealing with are bad, and we need to like perhaps more buy-in from our side to kind of teach people like what is possible and what isn't. I started thinking a little bit about, yeah, like if the Illinois bill passed and it was accepted nationwide, and somehow, but by some stroke of luck, they managed to convince everyone in America to fork off, like every validator to implement a change. That's not enough, right? It's over a third, but it's not half. So all you'd have is there'd be no finality, and the inactivity leak would kick in and eventually sort it out. Great, you've passed the notion of the law, but you're still not obeying. So this was another side point I wanted to think about a little bit was, okay, let's say then that things fork, right? Let's say that you're forced to. And we saw this when the POW fork of Ethereum happened, at the merge. People were going, okay, cool, who are the stablecoin supporters going to supply? Tether is probably going to do the, that meme of please maintain the peg no matter how illegal it may be, thank you, sir. What about Circle? They're American. If they get compelled to cleave to an American chain, what happens there? And there are some interesting things I'm thinking about do we really need to start at scale having euro dollars produced on chain by a UK company somewhere outside of the Eurozone? Do we need to widen the 3 pool? Perhaps not with UST this time. We do have better options in crypto for dealing with this kind of thing. We've got Koala. We've got LexPunk, we've got LexDAO, kind of working out what the obligations are and our duties in terms of, if you are the owner of a contract, does it look like a real contract? What does modification look like for there? What are your duties? I have no answers here because it's still really kind of in the wind, and I find it really fascinating. I didn't think a few months ago that I'd find myself reading Stanford journals when I went to bed, but here I am. So I'm closing pretty early, this has only been about 15 minutes. I've been reading a bunch of Scott Patterson's books, really, including The Quants, and yeah, John Maynard Keynes' quote from 93 years ago. History rhymes. Blundering in the control of a machine that we do not fully understand. We'll get there eventually, but yeah, a lot of weird questions about kind of what contracts mean legally, what they don't, how we upgrade them. I'm ending on that. Ask your questions, or let's wait for the closing ceremony. I'd like to apologize to the cameraman as well for having to follow me do that little autistic walk up and down the entire time. I am so sorry.
What protocol are you writing about for your next presentation?
I really thought that my bit at ETHCC would be every year I would do a presentation on the contracts, the protocols that got wrecked. That's my thing now. I'm the guy who turns up the Grim Reaper and mocks things that got done. And then yeah, the Wormhole thing happened, and I was like, oh, this is fascinating. And I've spent a bunch of time reading about contract law, so I guess this is my thing now. Next year, I don't know. I don't know if any other mics are being passed around or if I should just get off the stage. Oh, I promised someone I'd dab, so. Don't clap for that, Jesus Christ. Don't clap for that.
Can I ask a question?
Where am I looking? Ah.
So do you think there is any way around proxies? I mean, in the current state, I don't see any way to build a sensible project without using the proxy pattern. But at the same time, of course, you have to trust the team that's building that. Where do you see a way around it?
So I think I've completely blanked now because I've spent my energy, but there's a proposal for a Create 3 that's coming out now that you could theoretically replace the diamond proxy pattern with, because if you do a self-destruct and Create 2 now, you can replace the bytecode, but you remove the state. There's some EIP that goes, actually you could just kill it and restart the whole thing while leaving state in touch. That just kind of moves the goalposts a little bit. You're well, we've got rid of diamond proxy patterns, but we've still got a Create that has the same kind of trust implications. I don't know. I genuinely think it's either you nuke it all and you completely sever the link, or you accept that at some point, if you are a docs entity, you do have legal obligations towards things. And I think it's not been long enough to kind of fully realize the ramifications of that. Yeah, these are happening in the UK. We joke in America that like in the States that like the UK stuff doesn't matter, but it might do. Sorry, no solid answer. If this comes from Tina.
No. No, it actually comes from Hudson. Hudson Jameson?
Yep.
Yeah, so basically he asks, what is the worst and best case scenarios for law around this topic?
It's a good question, Hudson. I wish you were in the audience so I could shout at you for it. I think worst case would be something like SB 1187, where we are told that it's not even down to ownership of contracts, and it does literally have to be like at the validator or the staker level of control. I think you could also do things like, I think like MiCA in the EU has some things that go like, oh, you can launch a coin, but if you have a white paper, and there are some kind of like natural implications, like you have to be on a registry, like doxed to do that, and so that you can be found if something needs to happen. Best case, I kind of want to leave it to Koala and like LexPunk and LexDAO to work out. There's probably a joke here to be made about using like Kleros Court for working things, but I truly don't know, and like it's a bit frustrating for me to be standing up here going, oh, these are cool questions, and I don't know what like the utopia GIF looks like for this. Sorry, Hudson by proxy. I have 3 minutes left. Not everything's a DAO, Nick.
Hey, Laurence. So, which protocol are you going to hack next?
I did wonder if like there was going to be weird PR from like Euler for like going, the bit, like should you be working for them? The answer is Aave, and it's coming in 6 days. So if this actually happens, I'm genuinely moving out of the country. Oh, Nick?
Yes, I am going to mention DAOs. So it's obviously kind of insane, right, to expect Ethereum to fork. And this is one of those things where, they can try and force compliance and then fail, and then so they won't attempt because there's no way to comply to it. But what are your thoughts on the likelihood that they're going to start compelling DAOs with like centralized token supplies? So like, it is feasible to say Compound, 200,000 token holders, but quorum's met by 12 people. What's the likelihood they're going to start trying to force like OFAC compliance on things like Compound or anyone with DAO?
I do wish I had the degen Spartan one that Dennison used just now, of the what color do you want your Lambo to be? It was Mark that had it in his. I think like there's been some weird precedent with like Uki. But that wasn't like about forcing them to do things. That was just about like the obligations that they held as owners of the token. OFAC stuff, like we don't have an OFAC SDN in like the UK, and like that's kind of where I'm focusing on right now. I think I've stared down a threat before where we were told you need to pass a certain vote, and the response to that was just pretty much like deafening silence. But like it didn't seem like there was really a path to like enact that, like well, okay, what are you going to do? You don't know who like half the controllers are. Again, like it's nice to think about that, and I think Koala are probably like the right people to do that. They did the model DAO law, and like they're trying to working on like kind of legal personality and obligations, and it would be curious to see like if their follow-on is like, okay, cool, what does that mean now if you like are the legal steward of a contract? But beyond Uki, like I don't think I've seen anything else recently, at least not that I can remember. I've got a minute left, so I'm going away. What's my favorite vegan food? They won't trap me.